paintings, I get a lyric off Richie like Kevin Carter. And like, I need to always put a photocopy of some of his photographs in with the lyrics. If you come down to it, I've got lyrics in front of me, plus a lot of his photos. Such an easy way to write a song. I haven't just got lyrics. I've actually got visuals as well. It's a mad way to write a song. And the same with interiors. Nick wrote the lyrics to interiors. He also gave me a few photocopy images of Willem de Kooning's paintings. I think, that is quite original, really. I don't think many people are in my position where they're almost given a project to actually write music to. Kevin Carter is this point in that song which kind of illustrates why a lot of that album worked out. I think, obviously, one of us wasn't there in the physical sense. And, I can see now that it made us pull together a bit more in musical terms. We knew that we wanted a trumpet solo in that song. And, like Sean, it's really hard to, make him do these things sometimes. Like it says at the end of A Bronx Tale, there's nothing worse than wasted talent. And, it just shows he just did it. And, I love the trumpet solo in Kevin Carter. It illustrates why we were musically taken off at that point, because we were all coming in with ideas. Perhaps the traditional way that we'd broken up our roles in the band had actually eroded at that point, because we all had to pitch in a bit more. We wrote Australia, and the only way I envisaged it sounding was that I wanted it to be a shiny Match of the Day song. I wanted them to play the instrumental version behind the goals of the month or whatever. That would have never happened before. That would have been shot out the water. It would have been like, you can't use that as a metaphor for how you want the song to sound. It's just, it's trivializing the lyric kind of thing. Obviously, that stems from the fact that, we were under a lot of pressure in every sense at that point. And I suppose that gave us a bit of an outlet. It dare I say it brought an element of fun to it, which people wouldn't actually equate with us.
One of the noticeable changes with Everything Must Go was the Manic's newfound openness. There was less clutter and ambiguity than on some of their previous work.
A song like Design for Life, if Nick had written that lyric, 5 years ago, it would have been steeped in many more references. The true meaning of the song would have probably been hidden in the backlog of his own intelligence, And that's not on purpose, it's just, that's the way you are when you're younger. You find it much harder to edit yourself. It's easier to have some kind of editorial control when you get older. You want to get your point across, and perhaps you want people to understand you more. I'm not saying you're begging to be understood, but as you get older, you actually want to get your point across. And I think that's why there was a certain openness in some songs. There was almost invitations in some songs to actually be understood, which had never been there before.
While the band had discovered how to be more direct, there were still references to the Holy Bible and other older Manics material in the new songs. For instance, Everything Must Go retained their old intensity and their characteristic darker side.
Inbuilt melancholia will never leave our music. I think, once it does, I think we'll be very much a lesser band. That was another thing I was worried about Everything Must Go. There's a lot of dilemmas there. Do I want to listen to a record that still makes me feel happy in my sadness after all that's happened? We actually just had to record the album and just see how it felt. But as long as that inbuilt melancholia is always in our records, I think we'll always be a brilliant band, dare I say it.
The title for the album, meanwhile, was something which had been floating around the Manics camp for some time.
Nick's brother, Pat, he's a playwright and poet and stuff. He had a play that'd been knocking around for ages called Everything Must Go. And Pat had taken a picture of his son in front of a closed-down shop with Everything Must Go, written into the window line. His son was, charging in front of it. He was only about 3 years old, and he had a little bob hat on. I just remember just loving the photo, and he used this photo to put on the cover of his little manuscript. I just remember thinking, like, the title was brilliant and the actual image was brilliant. It was almost like a continuation of, like, Nevermind. I think I might have said to Nick it might be a great title for an album, or Nick probably said it to me, because it's usually him that says those things. So we stole it off his brother. Now, the play which inspired the title of the album is actually being put on in Cardiff. We finished it early, early in 96, but we kind of finished the bulk of it before the Christmas in 95, so it was like really burning a hole in my pocket. I remember going around London at Christmas time in 95, listening to Design for Life over and over again. Then people would ask me, how's everything going? I go, it's all right, I'm not sure. And I had this dilemma, deep down I thought it was the best thing we'd ever done, and then I didn't want to tempt fate. I just didn't play it to anybody. Didn't invite anybody's kind of judgment or opinion. I just really did not want to know what anybody thought about it whatsoever.
Though James was hiding the tape away, it was becoming clear that things were changing around the Manics. The sound, the way they worked, even their goals and the way they perceived success. Where was the old bravado?
I remember myself and Nick, just before the album was released, I remember us talking about what would be acceptable in terms of how many records we would sell to carry on after. I remember us saying, well, if we get to like platinum, if we sell 300,000, if we just about get there, that'll give us enough strength to go on and do another album. So like that shows that even though inherently I think we're confident people, at that point it'd be knocked out of us a tiny bit. For a band that would notoriously had high expectations of itself beforehand, that was quite a low expectation, I think. We'd always aimed a bit higher than that. Up until that point we hadn't really reached it anyway, but I think that shows that kind of traditional arrogant mode we were always in was kind of beaten out of us a bit.
The album's first taster, Design for Life, was released just prior to Everything Must Go and entered the singles chart at number 2. They were only deprived of their first ever number 1 by Mark Morrison's Return of the Mac. With Design for Life selling 300,000 copies and quickly becoming the Manics' biggest selling single to date, the anticipation for the accompanying album was massive. Everything Must Go was unleashed on the British public in May 1996 and copied Design for Life by hitting the chart at number 2. It was the culmination of so much that had happened to the band in the past few years that it could have been a terrible mess. Instead, pulling together the best parts of their previous albums and drawing on a determination that did them credit at the time, the Manics made a really good, rounded rock record. It had light and shade, it had music for stadiums and bedrooms. It was eloquent, edgy and powerful. The reviews were understandably good, but even that couldn't prevent the odd cynical swipe at the band.
When people kind of reviewed it, it was just all really bittersweet, because we got, probably we'll never get that many good reviews ever again. And I just remember that now and again you'd get challenged by some people who's like, there's a lot of charity directed towards you at the moment. There's a lot of, the feel-good factor's kicking in. People think you deserve a break. And I was just thinking, for God's sake, can't even get loads of good reviews without people thinking it's some kind of payoff, they've lost a member. Okay, we'll shoot them with kid gloves for a while. And I suppose that might have been true with a couple of reviews, but, it was nice to see that the album actually just went on to sell shitloads. It was nice to know that most people that came up to me, they said they loved the album. Most of those people thought it was our first album. We actually transcended, all the enemy boundaries we usually work within. Which is it's not what I wanted, but it's cool to get that. It's a period justification, You actually know that people don't know about your history and they don't know this and they don't know that and they can't prejudge you. It was really liberating.
NME editor, Steve Sutherland.
I've never really been a big Manics fan, so it didn't come as any great surprise. I think the thing with it was, because it still had Richie's lyrics on it, even though he wasn't actually on the album, meant that it was a kind of watershed album for them. And so there was a lot of public sympathy riding on the back of that release. So they could virtually do no wrong. I think they handled the situation with quite a lot of dignity, in the sense that they didn't try to milk it, and a lesser group probably would have done. But at the same time, it would have been a very churlish person indeed who wouldn't have wished that band well at that time. I think subsequently they've become very safe. But again, they're a very strange band, the Manics, because it's quite hard to criticise them because they've really paid their dues, I suppose. They've struggled against the grain for so long that you really, really can't find it in your heart now to criticise them for cashing in on all that hard work. I suppose it's amazing that they've survived, considering how talentless they were when they began. So I think most people felt pretty good about Everything Must Go, and I think the single itself was a pretty emotional clarion call to all those fans that the band was still out there.
Kelly Jones of the Stereophonics.
I think it's the most prolific album they made, songwriting and consistent as well. I think it's good songs throughout the album, really, compared to the stuff they did before. I just think the melodies and everything are a lot stronger. I think the songs are much better. Kevin Carter was a brilliant song. There's a lot of Richie's words on it as well. But Nicky did Design for Life and stuff like that. And that's a classic song coming from where we come from, because we completely understand all that, because that's what people do think of people where we come from. You do relate to it, and it's unbelievable that the rest of Britain related to it.
Although some of the band's more devout followers criticised them for, if you like, growing up, people all across Britain did relate to Everything Must Go. And in 1996, the Manic Street Preachers had gone from having a devoted hardcore following to becoming one of Britain's biggest bands. Everything Must Go spawned 4 top 10 hits, and both the album and the Manics featured heavily in all the end-of-year polls, scooping Best Album in Q, Select and Vox magazine. But the realisation of just how big the band had become didn't hit the Manics until February 1997.
The album never got to number 1. They just hung around forever. What do they say in Music Week? They had a long shelf life. And so things just built slowly and just happened. And we never really kind of got to that euphoric peak until the Brits, where we actually felt as if we were a massive band, or a really big band. All I remember at that time is just lots of anxiety, just dissipating, just just leaving me, just feeling more comfortable all the time. Just feeling, as George Michael would say, older.
The Brits in 1997 were a great triumph for the Manics. They were nominated for Best Band and Best Album, and Design for Life was up for Best Single and Best Video. They walked away from London's Earls Court with the Best Band and Best Album trophies, having also performed a rousing version of Design for Life. Nicky even proved he was still as mouthy as ever by sticking up for British teachers. See, that's the spirit. Fans of the old Manics would doubtless have expected the group to shun such a corporate ceremony, but that wasn't the case.
It was really cool, actually. I remember being really blasé at the night of the Brits and stuff, and going, "What does this award mean to you?" And he's like, "It's all right. It's the icing on the cake. It's cool. It's fine." And then, a couple of months later, I remember just giving the awards to my mum and dad. I remember seeing how happy it made them to actually get the awards. And that's when it really sunk in. I actually realised it on a level of getting that ready brick kind of glow around you. Actually got it quite a lot of months after we actually got the awards and stuff. When I actually given my parents and stuff, seeing how happy it made them feel. It's the first time I'd actually saw in their faces that they thought their boy had made it, kind of thing, So, after the fact, it made me really, really happy.
And they deserved all this attention, There were times when the Manics seemed like they were all slogans and little else, but there's always been a side to the band that sought to inspire and provoke. They'd already changed a lot of their fans' lives, but with Everything Must Go, they'd made an album which went beyond all that and finally reached a new level for them. The success, given the background to the band and the album, was a little unnerving.
The thing that surprised me was that it felt strange on stage when we were doing those concerts. We did Manchester 9X Arena. I remember that's the most nervous I've ever felt before a gig. I couldn't quite comprehend it on the night. And it was quite strange. The feeling I always got at that point was, it still should be 4 of us. It feels, the symmetry wasn't quite there for me, It was 3 of us, and it just felt as if it was strange for a 3-piece to be playing Manchester 9X Arena. For me, it was still meant to be 4. Still meant to be the 2 gorgeous wingers, the stalwart in the middle, and the bebop consciousness drummer in the back, And I still felt as if I was still being overtaken by certain events which I couldn't quite comprehend.
Richie's contribution to Everything Must Go, added to the Manics' resilience and ambition, had created a record that would be up there with the best for the millennium. But how would you describe it to an alien from another planet in 15 words? Or thereabouts.
For me, Everything Must Go is just a mass of contradictions. It's an album which is very traditional in its elements. But for me, there's something very phosphorus about it. There's something quite modern about it. Even down to the cover, there's something almost antiseptic about the cover. but the music is born of, like, you know, kind of something very organic. For me, the other album is a mass of contradictions, and that's why it works.